Welcome back to part 3 and the penultimate Woke Month, long month I know, Woke Month series. It's with Chelmsford Baptist Church. I'm Neil. This is Chris the cat. He's good, isn't he? He's not really been watching it, to be honest. He's only sitting here to keep warm because he's ancient and on the hope that he gets a snack. Anyway, in part 2, we thought about how we approach the biblical text, how we overlay our own history and our own understanding, and particularly here, how in the West we put the Western understanding. And there's nothing wrong with that, because the gospel has to be relevant. If it's not relevant, there's no point in it. But we've had nearly 2,000 years since, I do blame the Roman Church for this, or not the Roman Church, the Roman Empire for this. Since the Roman Empire took over, it moved the centre of understanding of Christianity into Europe, basically, into Italy. And then it kind of moved across. And then we have the whole history of colonisation and Christianity. Well, before colonisation, the way that Christianity was quite violent and aggressive and empire building, which it inherited from the Roman Empire. So once politics and power get involved with the church, well, the teachings of Jesus, I don't quite know how they fit. But there we go. So we thought last time particularly about how we understand. We assume that the Bible was written by people like us, people who saw the world like we do. So when we read something in the Bible, we read it as though we wrote it ourselves. And one of the ways to grasp and take Scripture seriously is say, well, what did the original writer understand? How did they see the universe working? What were their experiences in life? What were the issues they were facing? And while you can't be 100% certain you know this, there is good historical evidence to improve our understandings of how we read Scriptures. It also helps us see there's more than one way to see the world. There's more than one way to tell a story. And no offence, Mr. Chris, there's more than one way to skin a cat. We're all right. He's all right. And this is kind of what being woke is about. Being woke is about being awake to the reality of the world around us, being awake to the influences on our lives, awake to the culture that we're a part of, and it's our heart culture, and being aware that others are equally valid and equally powerful to them. It's a bit like music. You know, I know people who love jazz. I just don't get it. Same with the blues. There's people who love the blues and they'll play it all day and I don't get it. And then I play them my music and they're like, I don't get it. Or if you're in love, you think no one else can feel the way that I do about someone else, because we kind of think our experience is the only one you can have. So being woke is about seeing that other people feel and think things just as deeply as I do, but they feel and think different things. This also actually is about being a grown-up, not being so centered, not thinking the world is centered around me and how I view it. Anyway, this is quite a long ramble, isn't it? What we're suggesting at this point is to expand your horizons, see the world in different ways, from different angles, taste the flavours and the colours, see what God's given us. So in this final episode, before the wrap-up one next week, we talk about how we approach Scripture, how we've unthinkingly absorbed the inherited understanding, how can we try and contain, or how we do try and contain and control Scripture. And actually Scripture is bigger than us. God, here's the thing, God is bigger than my understanding of who God is. And then at the end, have your notebook ready, because Simon suggests some people you might like to read. And we've got some books here, or you can get in touch with me, some books that I found really useful. Anyway, that's probably the longest introduction ever, and it probably takes just as long to do that introduction as to actually have the talk. So let's get on to the conversation, shall we? You ready now? He's going to listen to it later on his headphones. So it's how we retrain ourselves, isn't it? Or getting into the habit of
Yeah,
saying, well, this is what it looks like now, and then almost shifting chairs, isn't it? And saying, I'm going to read it again now, and then I'm going to read it
and
again.
absolutely. And we need to stop because again, another westernized thing is I love the is it true? I might use that. Is it true? That's the Western thing. Having
Yeah,
to find a correct answer to things is a Western thing. Jesus's parables, they were never meant to for people to work out what he was talking about. They were never meant to be a parable that if you thought hard enough about it, you'd all come to the same conclusion. This is
yeah.
what he means.
You're
The
meant to
whole
hear it
point.
here, aren't you? That's where you're meant to hear the story. Here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. You're meant to hear it here. It's meant to be subversive. It's meant to challenge you. It's meant to shake you. It's meant to rock you. It's meant to do all sorts of stuff to you, most of which isn't good for your sense of who you are and your feeling. That's what it was meant to do. It's meant to piss you off. It's meant to fill you with joy and hope. But they're never meant for you to intellectually go, I know what Jesus was talking about there.
yeah,
But westernized thinking, that's what we need to decolonize. How many church services have you been to where people have taken a parable and have come up with try to come up. I mean, Revelations again is a huge thing.
yeah,
How many different books have you got that have trying to accurately talk about historical events in the end times? They must mean this, and this is this, and 666 is this, and barcodes and wars and Hitler's and everything else, because we're constantly obsessed. So what is it true? This is a future
yeah,
prophetic thing. When are we going to see it actually happening in a way that we can put fact around it?
yeah. And I suppose that's a. I mean, we need to start wrapping up. We've been going on. I'll have to split this one. It's almost a control thing, isn't it? Because if I can see it, I can almost contain it then within my mind, within my field of vision. Therefore, I have control of it. And I think that's partly why Jesus told stories, because stories hold you, really. You don't hold them. When you dissect them and go, this bit means this bit means that, therefore, then you
Love
you
it.
you've killed the story, haven't you? But stories
Ah,
actually live with you. Well, I don't watch many films, and one of the reasons is, I don't watch. I'm funny about films is that they stay with me for days afterwards. If I watch a film, it haunt me is probably the best word I can use, because the story just stays with me, and I can't handle it. And I think that's, yeah, because I'm a snowflake.
right. But that's the power of stories. And ultimately, so there's a book I've been reading about the storytelling creatures. Ultimately, that's all we are with stories. Now, your identity is a story. Um, all of all of what we are is a story. That is what we are. We're stories. We're wonderful, beautiful, complex stories. And I think when I come back to the decolonization of it, I think one of the things that African culture, the richness of African culture is within the depth and the beauty of the stories. Storytelling that just and the thing is, if you hang out in my community where you have lots of African families and Caribbean families and stuff like that, all sat, it's the telling of the stories. And the
Yeah,
stories, there's elaborate stories to make you cry, stories to make you laugh, all over the top stories. But no one's sitting there going, is it true? We just listen to these stories because they're rich stories. And they're
yeah,
also stories that are actually go back in time as well. And I think of two black people walking past each other and they look at each other, a little nod, a little nod. White people very rarely, if at all, will walk past another white person and just go a nod. But all the time, and then hello is very important. All the time, black people walking past another black person, complete stranger, and they'll say hello, a little nod, a little nod. And it's that recognition that we are connected by a story. There's a
yeah,
story that is connecting us. There's a as a people. And that story, you really track back, you will end up in Africa on that story. And it's that story of a journey that we all know about and we all feel that takes us uh, across the Atlantic and then back here and where we're at. I think that's it. That's probably what I'll
That's great.
finish on
I
there.
mean, we could go on forever. I mean, I got a load of other stuff, but I don't know. I think for those of us that are trying to deal with this and do better in our lives, you've got to start somewhere. And I think that it does start with, why do I think this way?
Yeah.
And do I have to think this way? And understanding other ways of thinking. And one of the words is decentering, isn't it? Which, as human beings, wherever your story is from, we have to learn that the world isn't just me. And that's, as
Yeah.
a society as well, we need to learn the world isn't just
Yeah.
this part of
And
the world.
yeah.
And
And I
this,
think I
yeah,
was
go
going to
on.
say it's never been more important than in our church services,
Yes.
because our church services are still tied to this Western tradition of whatever, the language, the understanding, there's so much within it, the timekeeping, the value system behind it. It's there's so much about the westernized world in terms of capitalism, productivity, economics. It's entrenched. I mean, it could go on
Yeah.
for years. It's entrenched within our church services. I can't imagine many African cultures that would get their head around a an event starting at 10:30, having an order of service and finishing at 12. It's just such a foreign concept. It's come when you come, stay for as long as you need to, leave when you need to go. And whilst you're here, we will just share life and story and food
Yeah.
with one another.
No, that's been great. That's been really, really helpful. And I think it's something we need to keep thinking on as well. So, I
Cool.
didn't preempt you
Cool.
on this one. Is there any books that perhaps you can suggest? When you came and joined us that Sunday morning, we talked about this, giving you time to think. We talked about the parable of the talents, which is in Matthew 25. And you kind of led our thoughts. I don't like using the phrase black theology, and we talked about this because it implies that, there's
Yeah.
theology and then there's other people's theology. But from a black theology point of view rather than a white Western theological point of view, that take on the parable of the talents is fantastic. I would urge anyone to Google that just as a way of initially getting into this. Is there another way of seeing the story? And it's
So,
it's it's great. So,
so
is
from
there
a
anything else
Birmingham,
you recommend to us?
yeah, so from a Birmingham perspective, our good local theologian, Dr. Robert Beckford,
Yeah,
has written some really good books. One that I think I bought, which was Jesus's Dub. He's also written a book called Jesus's Dread.
yeah,
So both of those books are very, very easy to pick up. They're not theologically brain heavy, but they're very easy to pick up. And again, I think in terms of sort of like, if you want to talk about Black liberation theology, is James Cone. So anything from James Cone. And then again, we have he's American, but then we have our guy Anthony Reddy, who is I think he's a Baptist minister as well, isn't he, Anthony? Is he Baptist? I think he is.
I'm not sure
Anyway,
yet.
so he's written again some just some very readable stuff around black liberation. But the other thing that I think is really good, so not talking about some of the theological stuff, is there's a lot of just black literature out there. So Olivia Butler, I think she's written The Kindred, which is a good. She's in the 70s. Stuff like The Color of Purple, I think, are really important because Olivia Butler, Audrey Harper, these authors, they write what's called from a black voice. So when we're talking about the storytellingness and how we see the world through the storytelling, there's a lot of deep thinking within the, if you like, we call it fiction. So read a lot, read people like, Olivia Butler and people like that, Color Purple and stuff like that, just to get your brain thinking of a new way in which we talk about the world and talk about ourselves.
Yeah,
If
that's
that
great.
makes sense.
Well, thank you very much.
Right.
Really appreciate your time.
Nice one. All right. Cheers, mate.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
see
well,
you
hopefully
guys.
we'll catch up again at some point, but we'll consider, we'll continue this conversation. I think certainly we will in our church, and the voices are it is happening around the churches more, and there is a greater awareness. But how can we do better and recognize all people as God's children? That's there, because when the end comes, we're all round the table, aren't we? And
Yeah, exactly. Or when
yeah,
the beginning comes. So,
when the
da,
yeah.
da,
Thank you.
da.